Hi, good morning. This is Larry talking to you from near Niagara Falls in Ontario this cold winter morning. So, today I'd like to answer a question for one of my students, and this involves writing task one academic. So, my student basically asked me, how can you deal with a question that has a lot of information and also cover the requirements that you need to get a higher band score, like a band 7 or something like that? So that's a tough question. It's not so easy. He, I'll show you the question and we'll get right to it, okay? And I do apologize if I'm looking up or down today because I'm using two monitors as my computer's not working all that great. And I may be looking up or down, something like that. Okay. So anyways, let's have a look. You can see all my tabs up there. Here's the question. It is from Cambridge IELTS 3. No, Cambridge IELTS 15, I believe, the latest Cambridge book. So we have a pie chart and we have a table with, so there's 12 pieces of data down here, 6 different pieces of data here. That's a lot of data. So my student did not send me the question. I copied this from the internet somewhere. It's not very clear. It was all I could find, just to make sure you're getting the idea of the question, because it's very important to know what we are talking about here. So the chart below shows what anthropology graduates from one university did after finishing their undergraduate degree course. The table shows the salaries of anthropologists in work after 5 years. So those that had work, this is their salaries. So you notice the salaries are divided into 4 different ranges, or what we call salary brackets. Okay. And here we have in the pie chart different categories. So full-time work here, um, part-time work here. This one here, 5% is part-time work with studies, 8% is full-time study, 12% is unemployment, and 8% just could not be contacted, I guess, or couldn't be found. They had no information. So now that we know that, I'm going back up to this diagram because it's a little bit easier to see and more clear. So, okay, my student sent me a response, and there were quite a few mistakes and issues that we had to deal with, and we dealt with that. But then my student said, well, how do we do this? How do we write about this and not write 300 words, because it seems like that's what you need to write to fulfill all of the requirements of getting a good score. uh, So we are going to take that into consideration today. So the way my student also asked me to write a sample answer. So that's what I did. I wrote a sample answer. Um, but instead of trying to do it really short at the beginning, I thought I would write a very complete answer, you know, 250, 300 words, and then show how that can be reduced down. Um, in other words, what parts can we take out, not include, um, and maybe that will give you an idea of how you can approach these kind of things. The one thing I do want to make, the point I want to make, is that every task is different, which is what makes the IELTS challenging. What works with one task doesn't necessarily work for another one. Okay, so here is my answer. And actually, what I did was I color coded it. And before we look at this, I'm actually going to pause the recording for a second because I want to get one more thing for you. Okay, I just wanted to get you this. This is from my blog, actually. Um, and this is a system that I often use when I'm dealing with 2 graphs, okay? But I'm going to go away from this system, in the current graph. But this is the way I often do it. The 6-point system, we call it. First, write the topic for both graphs. Right? The pie chart shows, the table shows, or both items. Give an overview for graph 1. Describe the key features for graph 1. Then probably in the next paragraph, give an overall idea for graph 2, describe the key features for graph 2, and the final point, if there's any connection between the two graphs, you could show that probably at the end. All right. Now, if you are interested in this, I will post the link, but you can also just go to my blog and you can see this sample here and how I put all the sentences together and make a final version for your for writing about two graphs. But you can read about that at home if you like. So I just want to say that I was using that. So here I did in blue and in red, I tried to do the topics for both graphs. The first one is a little bit more complete, I think the blue one, than the red one. So I will read them to you. And if you want, you can pause the video after that to read them a little bit more closely. So what I'm saying is in the blue one, the pie chart shows what students were doing in terms of employment or further studying after graduating with a degree in anthropology. Right. While the bar chart indicates the proportions of these graduates whose incomes fell within certain salary brackets in 3 employment categories after a 5-year period. I mean, it is possible to maybe cut that down a little bit, and I'll show you how to do that in the short version. But here's a slightly faster version with a few, I don't know, maybe one less line, I guess. The pie chart shows the destinations of people who graduated with a degree in anthropology. So here what I did was I just used the title of the graph. I mean, I know a lot of you are really worried about using synonyms, and you know how I feel about that. I don't think you should do that so much in the first sentence of your essay or your writing task 1. But that's all I did here. And the thing is, it saves time. And I don't think it's going to take away from your mark as long as you have good vocabulary throughout your writing. And so here, and the table illustrates which of 4 salary brackets applied to anthropologists working in 3 different kinds of jobs after 5 years. So it's a little bit shorter. Yeah. You could also just say shows the salaries of anthropology graduates, you know, or how much anthropology graduates made or earned, I suppose, after 5 years of work. Yeah. It doesn't say really how much, if that's a salary or if that's how much they earned totally, but I'm guessing that's what their salary is. It doesn't really say. I actually just noticed that right now. Okay, so now we have this overview. So what I did, because I was showing you, I was doing overview details. So I did overview pie, detail pie, overview table, detail table. But as you see, if we add this all up together and say we'll choose even the red introduction, we're getting how many words? Let's check it out. I don't know. 275 words, which is going to take you probably more than 20 minutes. And, you know, it's probably, even if you do it really well like this, unless you can really do an essay really fast, it's probably not going to lead to a good overall writing mark. So we have to cut it down. All right. Okay, so, you know, the first thing I'm looking at is, all of this is an overview, and all of this is as an overview is probably too much. It looks too long, you know. Um, Now, if we're just looking at this pie chart here, if you just say this is the highest and don't mention anything else, I don't know if that would normally fit, but you do have to consider that we're doing an overview for both things. So I think one way to save time would be to cut down on the overview. Let's look at what I have now. It's very complete. Overall, the majority of students, albeit a small one, that means although just a small majority, had found full-time employment. And apart from this, a significant number were working part-time. A small portion of these combining work with the post-grad study. So like my student, I've tried to follow the same thing. I talked about people working full-time, then the part-time workers, and I mentioned these guys who were working and studying at the same time. So now I just have to talk about these three. Of the rest, there were just as many people unaccounted for, meaning with no information, as those in full-time postgraduate study, and slightly more were unemployed. Kind of trying to fit everything there in with some, like a typical overview, not mentioning any numbers, but even my writing there, I think I don't like it so much either. It's looking a little bit awkward as well. And now basically I do another paragraph here. You can stop it and read it yourself, where I talk about all the details. So I mentioned like which one's bigger, which one's smaller, go through all of them, and then do the whole thing again, mentioning the numbers. And this is obviously not efficient. So we have to figure out a way to get this overview. I mean, do I really want to talk about everything here? Remember, the overview, normally we don't want to just talk about the biggest thing, but at the same time, we want to give the message. What message? What is the big picture? What is this information trying to tell us? Okay, so think about that, and I'll show you what I came up with. But first, let's go down to the table. So here we see the table, and I'm going, oh my God, my gosh, we've got here 4 categories of salary. Here, 25,000. Let's just say salary. That's what I thought it was. 25,000 to 50,000, 50 to 75, 75 to 100, and over 100. And 3 different kinds of people working. Yeah. So, yeah. What's the first thing I noticed? Well, here we have, 80% of the freelance consultants and government sector workers are earning in the top 2 salary brackets, which is quite different for people working for private companies. So now if you're in anthropology, probably better to start up your own consultancy or work for the government. So anyways, that's a big difference that I see there. The difference between these two and this one. So since there are only 3 categories, that's probably how I'm going to deal with this overall idea here. Okay. So let's go down and have a look. How do we do this? In general, anthropologists working freelance or in the government earned higher average salaries than those in private companies after graduation. Okay, so we'll talk about the details later. Now, so I'm going, wow, that's a lot. I mean, we have this long introduction, either the blue one or the red one. We have this long overview here for the pie and this long overview for the table. Pretty long, not so long for the table. Um, so notice in the table, I only talked about higher, because if they're higher, the other one's obviously lower. I mean, and I'm talking about average salaries, because the average would be a good number to use because average is basically, when you have more people in the higher brackets, it's a higher average salary, right? So, so how do we deal with that? What are we going to do? Well, I'm going to suggest something very strange. Why don't we go without a topic? Let's try to forget about the topic. I mean, we always teach you, write the topic of the graph. Why? Because usually it takes you 1 minute. You just want to paraphrase like what the graph is about. But I find a lot of people spend 5, 7 minutes on this, and you're not really getting any points for it. According to the IELTS public band score, you get points for overall idea, key features, and how you organize your work. There's nothing that says you get extra points for the topic. But we need the topic because we need to know what you are talking about, right? Okay, so if you can stick them both together, that might work, right? Let's try it. So here my shorter version. I'll put this again as in purple, I guess. This is now trying to do the overall idea and the topic together. It may not be so complete, but it might be enough so that the reader knows what we are talking about. Okay, a quick glance at the data reveals that after leaving this university, most anthropology graduates had found work, and that after 5 years, working freelance or being employed by the government was more lucrative than working in the private sector. The word lucrative, if you are not familiar, means sort of like high paying. A lucrative job is one that, or a lucrative business is one that provides you with a lot of money. Okay. So here you see, which I'm just mentioning data. I'm not mentioning pie and table, but I'm still mentioning the main thing that people did after work and the differences between the salaries, that these people were making more money in as a freelancer or in working for the government, right? Because the tables focusing about work, that's why I'm sort of focusing about work and not really mentioning all those little other things. Because you know what? They're going to be mentioned in the next paragraph anyways, okay? And now that I have this overview here, I don't need this overview. I can totally take that out, and I'm totally taking out this. So all I've got now is the details. And already, if you look at this here, and we check out the word count, it's 188, which is reasonable, right? Now it's a little bit, you might say, well, okay, I didn't really mention up here all of the things that people had done, all the different categories, but I do mention them all here. So they are there. I mention every category. We'll check it out in greater detail. 52% of these graduates were working for full time. Now, for those of you that are my students, you know that I often mention this. It's a good thing when you're describing a graph where there's no change in time to start off with a figure. It usually leads to an easy, compact, easy to understand sentence, right? So 52% of these graduates were working full time, while 50% held down temporary positions, and a further 5% were able to keep jobs as temps while taking post-grad courses. Okay, so that we have half of the three in one sentence. And now another sentence for the other three. While 12% of the graduates were unemployed and 8% were enrolled in full-time studies, there was no information provided about the remaining 8%. Voila, we got it, okay? So now we're just going to go down to the last one, which is kind of tricky because about the data, because we do have a lot of pieces of data. Okay. Um, you know, I obviously, as I told you before, we're going to try and divide this down the middle here, noticing this big difference here, the 80% of the people in the higher brackets here for the two top jobs, right? Um, I'm not going to mention every single category. If you want, you could try to pause the video now and think about which ones you would mention and which ones would you maybe not mention when you're writing. I'm going to mention most of them, but maybe not all of them. Okay. So anyways, let's go down and take a look at that one, at the details there. So regarding remuneration, which means getting paid again for your work, a whopping 80%, a big 80% of both freelancers and public sector anthropologists made over 75,000, as compared to 55% of those in private business. Okay, so there we're doing this. So we're looking at the 80% here and the 55% here. But we've never mentioned even what the categories are. So I want to make sure I mention every category. I want to make sure I mention every job. Okay. So I do say that here. Interestingly, the figure for civil servants, meaning government workers, topped the list at 50% in the highest salary bracket, over $100,000. Okay, so we're looking at the top one. So there, I did mention the 50,000. I did, I could mention these in my original version. You'll see I do mention those as well. But I thought, well, you know what? I think it's okay to maybe not mention them if we're trying to run out of time here. So then I put logically, because, if something's high, the other thing will be low when you're looking at percentages, right? It was more common for employees in the private sector to fall into the lower two income brackets. 35% were in the second lowest, between $50,000 and $75,000, and 15% under 50,000. The corresponding figures for freelance and government workers, were identical at 15% and 5%, respectively. Okay, so that's talking about these figures here. As I said, I could have introduced these and these as well, and maybe these figures as well, but I didn't think it was as important as making that distinction between the higher people and the lower ones. Yeah, so that's how I would classify the data. I think that would probably, like this version here, would probably be good enough to actually get you a good mark, yeah, in your writing. So that's all I wanted to talk about today. I hope you have a good day. This is Saturday. I am going to work in a few minutes, but I thought I would share this video with you and hope you all have a good day. All right. If you have any questions or whatever, let me know. Okay. Bye for now.